And now, a word of appreciation for those of us who were never financially responsible to have our money in the financial markets. It's finally paying dividends. This is the ArsenalVision Post-Match Podcast. My name is Elliot Smith. You can block me on Twitter. Yeah, financial markets are melting down. And so for all those of you and myself who just never had the fiscal responsibility to get into those markets, well, this is our day. This is our day. But for those people who have been responsible enough to put their money there in the hopes that it would someday allow them to, retire or something silly like that, well, I'm deeply sorry. And I'm sure it will turn around and it'll all be okay and everything will be fine. But, in the meantime, it is one of those days where people confuse the markets for the economy and vice versa. But the good news is there's another market that we care more about. All of us collectively care more about: the transfer market. That's right. That's the market you really want to hear about. So we're going to talk Arsenal and transfers, and we're going to talk about transfers that have happened and may happen. We're going to talk about the preseason games that are upcoming. Our season preview material will be next week because I think, we want to get the Bayern and the Lyon game behind us and any other deals that could get done between now and then completely done so that we can have the most information necessary to make the least accurate predictions possible. That is what we strive to do. I do want to let you know that we are back, baby. This week is a true ArsenalVision week. We'll have a patron pod tomorrow. We'll have an instant reaction on Wednesday. We'll have a main pod on Thursday. We'll have a patron pod on Friday. We'll have an instant reaction on Sunday. We'll have all the season preview stuff next week. And if you're not familiar, by the way, if you're like, they talk about the patron thing, I don't know. Totally fair. I would feel the same way. But in case you're not feeling that way, let me just tell you, we do an instant reaction after every single game. Most of them live stream, so you can watch them immediately at full time. So you don't even have to wait the hour till the recording is done. And we do those with headlines, stock rising and stock falling. So they're a little bit different vibe, a little more emotional, a little more touching the third rail. Right after full time, although usually that's euphoria lately these days, which is a good thing. We do power rankings where we rank the pretenders, the other big clubs, and where we have them based on recent performances. We do 3 big questions. We do patron-only mailbag episodes. We do scouting videos and rewatch videos where we literally rewatch the game with Clive, and he gives us the tactical insight for which he is known. We do some office hours periodically on Discord. We have the Discord chat server, and basically we'd just love to have you there. It means the world to us, and we really try to take it very seriously to make it something that gives you an extra thing every day or almost every day and just makes it feel like, we're all going through the season together. But for those of you who either don't want to, understood, or can't, also understood, do that, we're going to strive to make sure that we give you great podcasts every Monday and Thursday to the extent that Monday and Thursday make sense with the schedule so that you have a great season with us. We are super excited for the upcoming season because treble winning seasons are rare and this one should be very, very special. Assuming the world doesn't blow up, which, right now, the way things are looking, that's always a possibility. So we'll continue to do the podcast for as long as there is a society for which the podcast is available. 3 minutes-ish to get that waffle out of the way. And here with me now is Tim. You can find him on Twitter at Stillmanator. Hello, Tim.
Hello there.
Checking in on your FOMO status from all the tour stuff. Did you survive it from a FOMO standpoint?
Just about. It was more... Yeah, some of the pictures maybe from Hermosa Beach, that gave me a lot of FOMO. But I think we'd both agree that I've only done one of them last year, but the greatest thing about these kind of tours is, a bit like, going to Premier League games or whatever is the coming together of people. That's what gives all of this so much meaning. The fact that it means something to other people is really what football is all about. It's about that kind of community, and it's a really, there are some really cool places as well that have those communities. And yeah, I did get the FOMO, but I am only a fortnight away from flying out to DC for the women's tour. So, hopefully see some people there as well, kind of corralling around the women's team.
Yeah, well, you're going to have a good time. We're going to miss you and have FOMO of our own, so everybody gets a little piece of that along the way. I got to say, we haven't spoken about it since it happened. So for those people who are not inclined to have a little dampness under their eyes at the start of a podcast, bear with us here. We're going to touch on Emile Smith Rowe leaving the club, off to Fulham. I think the mooted fee and the club he's gone to both look positive to me. This is one of those situations where I struggle to know how to analyze it because I believe that an Emile Smith Rowe who can play every game or be available for selection every game and get into some kind of rhythm of playing has the potential to be a great player in the Premier League. I don't know how long you can wait for that to happen. But if it happens, Fulham have themselves an absolute steal, right? However, it has not been able to happen for several years now. And I have always said nothing disrupts a team like a manager having a player in his plans who's not available to select when the time comes to use him. So I wish Smith Rowe the best. I hope for 36 games a season, he absolutely smashes it. And for the other two, he has the sniffles and can't play. How are you thinking about this move and what it means for Arsenal maybe, and obviously what it means for the player?
Yeah, it was emotional when the announcement came out, and understandably so. I think there's a few reasons for that. For me, I kind of I love the player, like I really, really do. And I think one of the things that's been quite difficult for Arsenal fans is we're assuming a lot about why he fell out of favour, but we haven't really had it explained. And I'm not necessarily saying it should be, particularly while he's still your player. You probably don't want your manager saying, well, actually, I'm not picking him because of X, Y, and Z. But there remains a little bit of mystery about it, and we think we kind of know, and we're reading between lines. And I've just always felt that Arteta, even at Smith Rowe's height, his comments seemed a little bit caveated. And I think the Occam's razor here is that Arteta regarded Smith Rowe as a good player, not a problem, not a Mustafi, not a Kolasinac or an Ozil or anything close to that, but a guy that he thought, okay, for a couple of years, you can be a big player, but after that, we're probably going to move beyond you. I think the injury probably certainly exacerbated that as well. So like psychologically, I moved past the player a little while ago, and I still don't really understand why we were so insistent we had to keep him last summer. But then again, to be fair, we didn't really get any injuries. Like Havertz didn't get injured. Like it could have. There is a universe where it could have left us short of cover. So maybe that was it. But once it was actually announced, it allowed me to kind of reminisce a little bit about this player breaking onto the scene. I think like the post-lockdown context is really important for that. A lot of things coalesced at the same time. Arsenal got better, seemed to be spearheaded by these two academy players together, which was very exciting. Crowds back in stadiums, and he was front and centre of that. And I think Arteta would acknowledge that there was a point where Smith Rowe probably saved his job, quite frankly. So, really kind of emotional at the same time. I think Fulham's a good move for him. They look like a fun kind of team. Alex Iwobi's there as well. But at the end of the day, Fulham and Crystal Palace were the teams that came in. And I do think that probably says something. Like when Chelsea decided to go past Mason Mount, it was like he went to Man United. There were reports that Arsenal and Liverpool were interested, like Conor Gallagher's going to Atletico Madrid, Spurs were, I think it does say something that there are probably it's mid-table clubs, but I just hope he goes there and plays really, really well. Perhaps gets back into the England reckoning or whatever. He needs to go and have a career now, and I think he's given us some really, really nice memories. And I think for a lot of us, there's probably just still that little bit of mystery where we just don't quite know. We can make good guesses, but we just don't quite know for sure why this player fell so far out of favour. Because I don't think it was about injuries, Elliot, because he wasn't injured last season and he didn't play.
Yeah, he wasn't injured constantly. I mean, he still had some of the issues, but to your point, I mean, he played 353 Premier League minutes last season, 172 Premier League minutes the season before that, and that's not enough for a player in their 22 and 23-year-old season. He's 24 now. He's right in the prime of his career, and I think he also suffers from being one of those players. And we all know a player like this, where it's kind of hard to say what his position is. And I think those players almost have to be more talented than other players because they have to be so talented that a manager feels like they can just put them wherever they need them and they'll be able to express themselves and influence the game. Like there's a part of me that thinks he's a striker, literally, because he gets a shot away quick. He's got such good inside the box instincts. Maybe he's a second striker, like a Jude Bellingham type. Right? Like a play off a striker and arrive in the box and feast on loose balls and score goals from broken play and things like that. I think his off the ball play is certainly something that might not have appealed to Mikel Arteta. I mean, when you look at the position he plays, potentially a left 8 role, and you look at who we're looking at, Mikel Merino, is there any less Emile Smith Rowe player than Mikel Merino? You know what I mean? In terms of what they do off the ball, their dual winning, their aerial dual winning, things like that. And, I've heard some stories about Mikel, something that I don't think I'm entitled to share, but essentially this won't surprise anybody. He expects everybody at Arsenal to live the way he lives and the way he asks his players to live. And I just think that maybe Smith Rowe struggled to live that way. But he's a guy I will always root for. It certainly opens up a position. 353 Premier League minutes for Emile Smith Rowe at age 23 is not enough. But 353 Premier League minutes at 17 years old for Ethan Nwaneri would be a heck of a nice way to get his feet wet in the Premier League, wouldn't it? 13 appearances Emile Smith Rowe made. If Ethan Nwaneri gets 13 appearances in the Premier League, he will certainly be on an interesting trajectory from a career standpoint, or Miles Lewis-Skelly, and I think they can both step into that role. It's interesting what pathways are, because 353 minutes is a disaster for a 23-year-old and an absolute boon for a 17-year-old. And so you can really change the narrative very quickly by flipping those minutes to someone who's trying to break through. Another player has left the club, Tim, and we haven't spoken about it a lot, and I'm reluctant to speak about it too much, but I think there's a little meat on this bone to just touch on, and that's Chido Obi-Martin leaving for Manchester United amid rumors that we made the best offer we thought was available, advancing him up the age groups and giving him a pretty healthy amount of money. Manchester United apparently, I think, dangled some first team minutes in front of him and a lot of money. I have some pretty strong thoughts about this that will surprise nobody. Oh, Elliot has strong thoughts. It's a day that ends in Y. But before I step up to the mic and say all the nonsense no one wants to hear, why don't you give me your well-rounded opinion on maybe not just Chido leaving, but this new dynamic in academy football that sees players moving more freely between academies throughout their academy tenure. And if you think that this might sort of be the future, as distasteful as it might seem, to be trading in 15 and 16 and 17-year-old kids, is this where the game is moving to? Because it's sort of the last inefficiency in the transfer market.
Yeah, it's a marginal, isn't it? And it's become particularly into focus with PSR, where the attraction of selling these players on is even bigger because of it being pure book profit and things like that. And transfers are becoming so expensive, salaries are becoming so expensive that a lot of clubs will reason it's worthwhile taking the gamble, because if you find your Bukayo Saka, everything else you've done has paid for it, basically. So, or rather, he has paid everything else you've done, like kind of looking for that gem, as it were. So, I do get why it's happening, and everyone knows a bit more nowadays. And these guys have got agents when they're 14 and 15, and all of that, and parents will know about all of this stuff, and maybe clubs will woo parents and things like that. There are Premier League clubs I will not name who have been in trouble for doing stuff like that. So I think all of that makes sense. And look, from his point of view, I think it'd be unbelievably stupid not to take that money. Like, if you're 16 and you're offered £30,000 a week, and it's at like United, like, it might be something different. I don't know if you went to Saudi Arabia or something, where it's like, yeah, still maybe take the bag, but that will probably tank your career. Like, as much as United aren't great at the moment, they're still a massive club, and if you come through at United, like, you've done really well and your career is going to be very set. So, like, at that age, and particularly at that age when there's so little certainty, like, there is still no certainty that he is going to be a Premier League player at all. He might have peaked. I'm not saying he has, but he might have peaked. He might smash his knee up tomorrow and it's all over. And so, I think most of us kind of underestimate, particularly those of us that support like elite Premier League teams, the vast majority of professional footballers don't make amazing money. It's the elite that make incredible money. But like, for a career that ends, if everything goes well, in your mid to late 30s, like, most footballers don't get paid nearly enough, like, to not have to go and work afterwards. So, like, even if he became like a League One or League Two footballer, if you just have 2 years where you get 30 grand a week, like, that can really set you on your way in life. So I think it'd be utterly stupid not to take it. And I think when you're at that age as well, at 16, it's not like he's on the cusp of the first team. He's not. He's not on the cusp of the first team at Arsenal. He won't be at United. He's at least a year or two away from that. And so the talk of pathways, I think, is completely misguided. I think when you're that far out from competing for a place, the pathway doesn't matter, because the pathway could change in one transfer window for a club like Arsenal or Man United. Like if we spend £100 million on a striker unexpectedly, like later in this window or in January, like that's whatever pathway you think there is, it's gone at that point. And Manchester United could just as easily do that, and they've already bought 2 young strikers anyway. So I don't buy the pathway argument unless you're like right on the cusp anyway. So like for him it all makes sense. I think for Arsenal it makes sense. I do not think Arsenal should be paying that kind of money to players who are just not a sure thing in any way, shape or form. I think that sets a precedent and a bad one. And I think it was you can spiral. And I think I said this like when this news first came out a couple of weeks ago. I don't look at Manchester United doing something and think we should do that thing. I look at Manchester United doing something and go, okay, I don't think like to me that's a good reason to not do it more than anything. So yeah, like even if he does like really track and he makes it and all of that, you know, it will kind of suck, but it is what it is. Like, you know, I don't think he should not accept that offer, and I don't think Arsenal should make him that offer.
Yeah, like if someone says your club is following the current Manchester United approach, you should be worried about your club. Let's put it that way. Yeah. That's not a good thing. And I think, look, this is a guy who scored 10 goals in a game in the U16s, scored 7 goals in another game. It's impressive, no question. I do think that everybody can understand that physically this is a player who has developed ahead of his age group and has stepped up and played at a higher age group, and I don't think has been quite that dominant at that age group, which does not mean he won't be a dominant, phenomenal first-team player for someone in the future. He is 16. I want everyone to stop and think about themselves at 16 and think about the opportunity to be offered a contract that over 4 years might pay you anywhere between £6 and £8 million. You have no idea what career you're going to have. It's a short one at best. And by 20 years old, he could have an amount of money that allows him to be comfortable his entire life. I'll probably work till I'm 75 years old. Some of that is due to the aforementioned financial approach I've taken in my life. But, you know, would I like to not have to do that? I mean, I'd do the pod till I'm 75. All the other stuff I could do without. I just think, you know, the amount of people giving abuse to a 16-year-old on social media for making a decision that is clearly in his best interest and in the best interest of his family to go to another giant club, by the way. It just doesn't make sense. And here's the thing. It'd be one thing if you're saying, well, he's leaving the club that raised him. It's not even the club that raised him. He's been at Arsenal for a cup of coffee, essentially. A couple of years. Arsenal's not his club, not his boyhood club. So I think we have to steel ourselves for what's coming, which is a pretty unpalatable trading in child contracts at the academy level. And it's not something we really see in American sport, because American sport sends kids to university, to college, before they go pro, at least for a moment. In most cases, not always, not in the NBA necessarily, but we know that there's a lot of grotty, unseemly activity that takes place below the surface to recruit those players to those universities, into those programs that get them ready for professional careers. This is just a little more visible than some of that. It's all hard to take when you're talking about people that are 15 and 16 years old. The single biggest thing that I can say is I just hope he has the right advisors and the right people looking after him. And I want to say one other thing, because there's a young player that just agreed to sign. Is it Ezekiel Esquivel? Now I'm really going to embarrass myself. Just decided to go to Saudi. And like a lot of people are saying, oh, this is why is he ending his career at such a young age, and, really have this sense of opprobrium about it. But here's the thing, and I think it's really hard for us as fans to connect to, because most of us play football just for fun, for free. And the thought of being able to lift trophies like the Champions League or the Premier League, like that's all of our dreams, the dreams that will never come true. But this is a profession. And if you are a young player and Saudi Arabia is offering you 80 million pounds over 4 years, it is a profession. And there are always going to be some players who very keenly understand that. And their attitude is, I get to go kick a ball in Saudi Arabia and make 80 million, or I can kick that same ball in England and make 20 million. And to us, and to me especially, like, those two amounts of money are the same functionally, because I have no idea how I would spend it, but they are different amounts. They have families, they have people to take care of. I think when it comes to money and players choosing to financially secure their future, I struggle to tell young men that they are wrong to follow what's in their financial best interest. And if you disagree with that, by the way, I totally get it. I think everybody's wired a little differently. I might do something different, me personally, and a lot of players do choose to do something different, but it is a career at the end of the day. And I guarantee you, everyone listening to this in our actual jobs, which most of us probably don't really want to have, if someone offered us 400% more money to do it somewhere else, I don't know how long it would take us to answer the call. So we'll see what happens, Tim. But like, I think the more important thing is that you have players like Ethan Nwaneri and Miles Lewis-Skelly who are much closer to the first team, because even if Chido had stayed, this is a player that realistically 4 years from now is starting to have a first team career, unless he's really generational. We're talking, 19 or 20 for a striker, maybe he's starting to break through. And like, that's a long, long way off. So Ethan and Miles, will be here certainly before Chido is. And we'll see what happens, because United do have a Højlund injury. They have Xerxes still integrating. Are they going to go to a 16-year-old? I don't think they are. I saw reports that Jadon Sancho and Bruno Fernandes might play center forward. So maybe this is a story that will be more interesting, 3 years from now than it is today.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I've seen a lot of strikers in youth teams over the years, and yeah, it's not all of them. Most of them haven't made it and have looked very, very good. I went on a Saturday afternoon. I went to watch the Arsenal 11 play away at Lincoln City, and these are always really interesting game. Well, really interesting is overstating it. That you have to really squint to look for the interest beyond. It was ground I haven't been to, so I wanted to go. But the thing that's kind of interesting about it is, like, we were all predicting that. And bear in mind, this is like the section of our under-21s that is not training with the first team. So it's almost none of these guys are going to make it unless they're like 16 now and they're just coming in. But you're talking about like 16, 17-year-old boys playing against Lincoln City, who are a League One team, who are 1 week out from starting their season. And we were all thinking that we'd lose like 7-8-0. Because that's what usually happens to the under-21s in pre-season. They start off getting closer to, we're talking like non-league, League Two kind of level opposition, and it's quite even. But as you come towards the season, they start to lose. Like they lost to Bishop Stortford last Tuesday, Wednesday night, and that's purely because of the physical level. Now, don't get me wrong, a lot of the kids who are playing for our under-21s, if they play League One football, they've done brilliantly. And I don't mean to sound disparaging saying that. Like, they've done amazingly if they get into League One. Like, the majority of those kids that were playing for Arsenal, probably, like, some of them won't even be professional footballers. Many of them will end up in non-league, which again is good. You're making a living from playing football. You are one of the best footballers in the country. But like Lincoln as a kind of opponent, that's where a lot of the good ones will be. But you're talking about Lincoln, where like the guys are somewhere between like 20 and 35, and they're starting their season next week. And the way that game went was basically, actually, Arsenal only lost 2-1. Completely dominated the ball in the first half. Higher technical level. Lincoln couldn't really get the ball off them. They didn't have the physical means to do anything with that possession in the final third. They were passing it really, really well. But when it came down to it, all of the forwards were about 5'5", and they just couldn't they literally couldn't just lose their marker. Yeah, because they're teenage boys, right?
Yeah.
And as the game went on, Lincoln's physical advantage took over. So this is just a long way of saying, if you are at a level where you can, like, you're physically developed very early and you can compete, or rather you're like much bigger than your kind of your contemporaries,
Mhm.
that is a very big advantage in youth football. I'm not saying that is the only reason that Martins shines. Like, clearly there's more to it than that, because there are still some big guys in youth football and some early developers who are not scoring like 10 goals a game. So there's clearly something else there. But the physical edge makes it so
Of course.
difficult to properly judge at this stage. But then again, to be fair, like, he's 16, he's not done physically developing yet either. So he is going to get bigger, he is going to get stronger. So, I wouldn't write him off on that basis, but it's just so difficult to tell. And we've had guys come through who we didn't necessarily think would come through, and we've had guys that we thought would that didn't. And yeah, it's so difficult to forecast at that age and at that level.
Yeah, to your point, like famously, Michael Jordan, the basketball player, I think you've heard of him.
I think I've heard of him, yeah.
Had an older brother who used to dominate him when they played one-on-one, in their back, in their driveway or whatever, because he was just bigger and stronger. And Jordan couldn't do anything against him. Well, his older brother never played the game at any level, and Jordan went on to play it at a decent level. And I think that's a good example that when you're a child and you're playing against a man, like, that's just really tricky. And to that point, we can say, and I don't want to hype it too much because Max Dowman is 14. So again, putting everything in context, played against the 18s the other day, and there's some videos going around that just highlight the skill and the quality that player has. And, I do think that when you see someone showing technical level like that, that has nothing to do with their physical development against the U18s, that's really encouraging. Certainly a player we won't be talking about for a few years, but just a reminder that there's always that next very exciting young player, and how their career develops at that age is nearly impossible to chart. So you just have to be patient and believe that the academy is doing the right thing. And I think it would have been fair maybe a few years back to where the academy wasn't doing the right thing. But when you look at the options coming through now, with Miles Lewis-Skelly and Ethan Nwaneri, and you look at, I think Josh Nichols looks good. I think Aiden Heaven looks good. I think Salah Adin looks good. There's a lot of very talented players, even if they don't all wind up at Arsenal. And the academy seems to be doing some good things. So I think we'll keep the faith with that and just hope for Ethan and Miles to get their chance, maybe even this season.
Yeah, Salah Adin's little brother scored the goal against Lincoln. Nice little goalkeeper came out and, messed up his kick and just floated one in from 40 yards. So very nice goal. But I didn't realise that there were two brothers.
Mm-hmm.
So I was like, what's he doing playing in this game? Like, surely he's way past this now. So yeah, there's two Salah Adins in the Arsenal Academy currently.
Suffice it to say, I was not born with that kind of genetic predisposition to playing any kind of sport. I always think it's incredible, right? Like, I'm at the age now where, like, guys I grew up watching play American sports that I loved, or even, football and stuff, their kids are now going into the professional leagues. That's always a little bit scary. Well, a player that may be going into the Premier League for Arsenal is Mikel Merino. We can touch on this briefly. The rumor's gotten a little more complicated in the last maybe 24 hours with reports that Merino is going back into training for Sociedad, but the reports are that we have a good relationship with that club, that talks are progressing nicely, and it does seem like this is one that is winding its way towards happening. I don't think we need to do the "do you think he'll come" analysis because, like, frankly, who knows? But it seems like it. I think it's much more interesting to say what he will be. And so we've talked a lot about what his level might be, and we've done a scouting video for him over on Patreon if you want to check it out. I think what's more interesting to me is how we might deploy him and what we might do with him. And one thing I was thinking about, Tim, is that, this is a player who wins, I think it's fair to say, an absurd amount of aerial duels, like an absolutely absurd amount. And David Raya at Brentford used his long distribution to Ivan Toney as a very big weapon, with Toney then playing at Tim Buemo, and they would create a lot of danger that way. I'm not saying Arsenal are about to go full Sam Allardyce, although that'd be fun. But I do think that everybody was saying last summer, we need a plan B, we need a big striker, we need a big striker, we need a plan B. Well, maybe the plan B isn't a big striker, it's a big 8, because we went for Kai, and now we've gone for Merino. And if you have Kai at 9 and Merino at 8, suddenly, maybe against Man City at the Etihad, when that press gets onto you and it's a little bit suffocating, your exit is long. Maybe in some of those difficult away grounds, maybe when the pitch isn't good, maybe when you're struggling to progress the ball, maybe when you're playing a Rice, Merino, Odegaard midfield and the ball progression isn't what you were hoping it would be on that day, Raya to Moreno or going long to Moreno going long Nakai, gets the ball to Martinelli quickly so we can take advantage of more direct play. Again, I'm not saying that should be plan A, and I'm not saying that's all Merino can do, but I think it adds a string to our bow and certainly allows us to approach games a little bit differently at times when maybe ball progression isn't working. So that's just something that I thought might be an interesting way we could use him. Do you have thoughts on how we might play and if going long could be a unique new addition to what we try to do?
It could be, but we kind of already have Havertz for that anyway, whether he's kind of left eight or up front, unless we just want another one because Kai Havertz won't be able to play every single game. I think it's less about that release valve thing. I think it's more that I really recommend Billy Carpenter wrote a really, really good detailed piece about Merino and, his late arriving in the box and challenging for headers. Like, we are not, it looks like, going to be able to sign. I'm not sure we'll sign any type of striker, let alone like the Goldilocks striker that is going to be the one that wins us the game at the Etihad and Anfield and all of that little final edge that just wasn't quite there last season. But if we can find another way to score a goal, that would be very good. And almost like, because that's something that Smith Rowe did very well for Arsenal when he was playing on the left, to your point earlier, that late arrival in the box and everything like that. And, I think just having a bit more threat from crosses as well, so that there's maybe more than just Havertz to aim at or standing up across to the back post. Because I do think that when we signed Havertz, do you remember he scored that goal on the back post against Barcelona in LA, and we were talking about, we'll see that goal a lot next season, him creeping up on the back post. We saw it a couple of times. He scored at Brentford a bit like that, but obviously he moved up front, which kind of changed the position and the trajectory of his runs. And I do wonder if there's a part of it is just about, that box crasher when the ball goes into the area and you've got someone like Saka, for example, kind of chopping back on his left and aiming that kind of diagonal cross to the back post that he's so good at. And so I think there's a bit of that. I think also when you look at data points when you're assessing a new signing, I think you really got to look at the ones where the player absolutely excels or something he clearly does a lot of, and you have to assume that that's a big part of the reason Arsenal are signing him. And Merino wins a lot of duels, aerial, ground, otherwise, like an absurd amount.
To put it in perspective, the amount of duels he wins would be like two
double
good
Declan
seasons.
Rice.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
For Declan. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, exactly. And we think rightly of Declan Rice as a bit of a duel monster. So I'm really fascinated by this signing, though. And I think it shows you, I've been thinking about this the last couple of days, like psychologically where you are with your club and your team. Because I was fully expecting Arsenal to try and sign like a younger Jorginho or Partey. And that's not what we're doing. And so if this had been 5 years ago, Elliot, I'd be going, what the hell are we doing? Why on earth are we signing this player? Like, Rice has been playing in that position. We've been playing with Jorginho and Partey. Zinchenko's come out of the team. And by the way, one of the reasons I think Zinchenko will never play midfield in an Arteta team is because duels are one of his biggest weaknesses. And that's clearly very important to Arteta and probably as well one of the reasons Smith Rowe has gone. So a few years ago, I'd have looked at a signing like this and gone, what are you doing? This looks confused. This looks stupid. It looks panicky. But because of like where we are at the moment and the way things have gone, I crane my neck and go, this is interesting. Like there must, like, I kind of trust that there's a plan with it. That because this, I think this has surprised all of us. Like, if we're honest, I don't think that any of us thought that this was the type of midfielder that we were going to sign, but it is. And so we're kind of retrofitting, like, okay, so what we're trying to do with this guy, are we really kind of back to the kind of Rice in the six? Is that still the long-term plan for him? Might well be. That wouldn't really cause me any issues psychologically or anything. So, when you feel that level of trust, and also because Arteta does have a flair for tweaks, a bit like Guardiola, that kind of we're going to do something a little bit different this season, and we're going to be a bit less predictable, and we've got another trick up the sleeve type thing. So, like I'll be honest with you, this for me at the moment, this is like I'd call it a faith-based position, this signing, because I don't really understand it, if I'm 100% honest. But I'm at a level of but I didn't have Havertz one either, for very similar reasons. Like I'm on a kind of level of trust which I acknowledge is probably not like intellectually entirely sound, but I kind of thinking that I trust that there's a good plan for us to be signing a player like this, because it's really not who or what I thought it would be.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I mean, the other thing we have to bear in mind, I think, is that players may be there with certain competitions in mind, and he was very good in the Champions League. And I think we sort of lost the midfield battle against Bayern in the Champions League, physically, technically, however you want to say it. I think we struggled in the midfield there. And I think Merino brings experience and Champions League quality to the midfield and a way to contest the midfield that maybe we didn't have. If you think of it this way, if the idea with Kai was to have a big, dual-winning, pressing agent, off the ball, left 8, and now Kai is the center forward, that leaves us short a big, dual-winning, off the ball, late arriving, pressing left 8 option. So maybe what Mikel has done is thinking in Merino is, well, if Kai is now my 9, I need that 8 back that originally I thought Kai could be.
We think that, like not necessarily that Havertz will play every single game, but maybe that like the balance of, because I assume when we bought Havertz, we were thinking 80% midfielder, but 20% striker. He played there against City, right, on his debut, and that maybe that ratio has changed. Because the other thing you've got to look at is, what was the first thing we tried to do this summer? We tried to buy Sesko, right? We tried to buy a big striker, and it didn't happen. And the striker market looks very, very dry.
Agreed.
So, is this a kind of... It feels to me a bit like, okay, we couldn't get that striker, so what we're going to do, we're going to use Havertz and Jesus interchangeably. Like, in lieu of having the solid gold option up front, we'll try and intelligently use these two guys who are really good options. And that maybe Merino is just another way of getting another big fucker in there. But also because that ratio with Havertz is changing. I don't think it will be like 100% striker, but maybe it's going 80-20 the other way. Maybe it's 50-50. Like, I feel like the formula has probably changed there. And in a world where we get Sesko, I imagine this signing probably doesn't happen.
Yeah, and if you don't get this signing and Rice plays 8, you have a world-class left 8 in the mold of what we're discussing. But I do think you have a 6 problem, because you have Partey and Jorginho, both in their 30s. Neither are going to be able to play every game. One in Jorginho, who I think still looks very good when played, the right amount. And another who I think looks sort of nearing the end of being able to be used at the level we want to play. But what if Declan Rice is a world-class, best in the world level 6? I think most people believe that that's the future for that player. The people that I listen to that are intelligent, other than myself, obviously excluded from that group, is believe that 105 million, 110 million pounds for Declan Rice to play 8 couldn't have been the plan, as much as 105 million pounds for Declan Rice to become, the base of our midfield, the Rodri version for us. And I think he can be that. And so if you have Merino at 8 and you have Kai occasionally at 8 and you have Odegaard at 8 and Declan Rice is primarily playing 6 in most games, I think that is a brilliant future. It just remains to be seen if the ball progression will be good enough. And I do think with Calafiori and Ben White inverting, I do think with Odegaard dropping deep, Billy Carpenter has done some predictably excellent stuff in the last few weeks. One thing he did is he looked at Odegaard's ball progression when he sort of dropped deep, and it puts to shame the ball progression of some of the best progressors in the league, like Rodri. I mean, he completes it at an incredible level, and he does it at an incredible volume. So there's a lot of ways that we can replace that. I think it is a signing that I was initially skeptical of, just because I don't know that I looked at this player as being what I had in my mind as certainly not the 6, but I don't think he is a 6, so forget that. But as the 8, the heart wants what it wants. I like Eze. You know what I mean? I like that. I also think because we went into the summer thinking, oh, we're going to spend 100 million pounds again on Bruno Guimaraes, who I think gives you a little bit of everything. You want to play him at 6, you want to play him at 8, you want him to pass, you want him to assist, you want him to score. He can do a lot of that. Now, to be fair, I just don't like the player because I don't like his personality in the games we played against him. But you go from that to sort of a 28-year-old, 20 million euro, 20 to 30 million euro player that's been at Sociedad for 6 seasons. But you start to read up on it, and his manager a couple seasons ago vocally said this is the best player in La Liga. Now, of course, the manager's going to say that, right? Except the manager had other players on his team he could have said that about. He very specifically said about Mikel Merino, the way other managers talk about the players in glowing terms. He kept some very good players out of the Spain team, scored some important goals for them. At youth level, he showed different strings to his bow in terms of completing passes at 90% and being very progressive. So maybe there is a hidden gem here. And I think some of my reductive analysis on, well, he's 28 and he's been at Sociedad for 6 seasons and, he's not much of a passer. Like, okay, that's the initial reaction. Now, having had some time to watch him, scout him, read what other people have to say about him, I think I can see the vision, as the title of the pod suggests. Mm-hmm.
And I guess also in terms of, again, this is me craning my neck, my faith-based position, because I don't really know and I don't entirely understand. But, I wouldn't say that Arsenal are like an amazing counter-pressing team in an attacking sense. I think Arsenal have really good shape and structure and they press well and all of that. But I can't envisage many goals where there's like a high turnover that we force and we get away with the ball and run and score. And I don't know
the number of high turnovers we force, we score fewer goals than other teams that force fewer high turnovers. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, that's probably true. It's probably more of a conversion issue. But yeah, I do wonder as well whether it's a little bit about that as well, about not just effectively blocking the opposition's building moves, but actually having a little bit more there, having a little bit more of loose ball and all of that. And yeah, like, because Gabriel Jesus is really good at that, but if he's not going to be playing all the time, I guess sometimes you look at a signing because of their position. So, it's a bit like we are short a right back. So we go and buy you have selected a right back, Lee Carvalho's putting challenge just style. But sometimes I think you look at a signing based on attributes as well. So you might sign someone and say, well, actually, we've got a few, like Calafiori, right? We do actually have already in the squad like 3 guys who can play left back, assuming that's what he's been bought for, but none of them really do what he does. So that's not so much a positional shortage, it's an attribute shortage. And I do wonder if Merino would be more in the kind of attribute than, strictly we need someone in this position.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we'll hold fire on any more on Merino. The problem with the Merino and the Calafiori signings is that they were things that we kind of think we knew were happening for enough weeks before they happened that we had scouted them, reported on them, had guests on them, talked about them again. By the time these signings happened, there's just not a lot left to say except to watch them and see what they look like in an Arsenal shirt, which I'm excited to do. I still want to talk Eddie Nketiah's potential move or non-move away from the club. I want to talk about Gabriel Martinelli and the important season he has coming up and the question of whether we can actually be ready for the start of the season. I'll explain what I mean about that in a moment. But before I do any of that, I should tell you that this podcast is sponsored by NordVPN, and this is a product that I use. I was actually just telling my dad about it the other day. We were talking about looking for flight prices, actually. And he was saying that, if you use a VPN and you go search, like literally in foreign countries, sometimes you can find a flight price that's lower. Now, whether you can book that flight, more on that anon, because I'm going to try that trick. But you can definitely watch Match of the Day if you're not in the UK, or you can fly over to the UK for a game, as I sometimes do, or fly out of the country if you need to. Remember, we can watch every game here in the US, but if you're out of the country, you can't access that account. With a VPN, you can access that account. So you can watch the things you need to watch. If there's social media videos that are geo-blocked, you can get around that. You can also protect yourself from being tracked when you're on all those websites that you're not supposed to be on, but you should totally be on because, everybody deserves a little fun in life. So you can get NordVPN with our code, and it is a really good deal because you get a discount off their regular plan, and you get 4 months for free. And you have a 30-day money-back guarantee. So, you can download the app, put it on your phone, put it on your iPad, put it on your computer, use it watch some stuff, watch some games. You need to watch a stream. Sometimes us football supporters are watching some streams in some weird places. You definitely want the protection in that case. NordVPN.com/ArsenalVision. NordVPN.com/ArsenalVision. That's NordVPN.com/ArsenalVision to get a huge discount off your NordVPN plan, 4 additional months on top, completely risk-free with Nord's 30-day money-back guarantee. Do it now. This podcast is sponsored by BetterHelp. BetterHelp isn't online therapy. It's therapy that's online. And it's just basically therapy. I've spoken in the past that I've been to therapy. My mother has participated in therapy. She's now in her 80s. She doesn't drive. What do you do when you don't have the time to go drive to a therapist? You don't have time to find, an office in your area, or there isn't a specialist in your area, or for one reason or another, maybe you don't have coverage for that kind of service and the cost of it may be too much. I still believe firmly that going to a therapist, sitting in their office, being there is the way that I did it. And I think it was wonderful. But I think there's a saying, don't let perfect be the enemy of good. Sometimes doing something that helps a bit is better than doing nothing. It's like exercise, right? You might say, I only have 15 minutes to work out, so I'm not going to do it. Well, the 15-minute workout is better than the no-minute workout, right? Go talk to somebody and get things off your chest so you can get refocused. I mean, that's really what it helps you do. So you can stop comparing and start focusing with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/vision today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/vision. Do it now. And finally, well, we all know that I'm going to read something silly. That's how this works. Sizzle alert this summer. Let the only thing smoking at your barbecue be the grill, not your grooming game. Okay, there you go. That actually wasn't so bad. The ultimate summertime package includes the following: the Lawnmower 5.0 Ultra, which does have the foil blade now, so you can go completely clean. It works in the shower, long battery life. Look, you probably have something in your shower right now, like an old rusty blade that you are using on your privates, and that just doesn't strike me as the way to go. The Weed Whacker does ears and nose hair, and I'm at the age where I need that, and it's a good one. There is an aftershave lotion. There's an anti-shaving deodorant. There are the Boxers 2.0. I use those for workouts. I actually find the Boxers fit really nicely and are great for working out. And there's these, I don't know what to call them other than what they call them, crop mops. They're moist towelettes specifically to freshen up that area. So it's a great package. Get 20% off and free shipping with the code ArsenalVision at manscaped.com. That's 20% off with free shipping at manscaped.com. Use code ArsenalVision. Manscaped, the perfect way to get your patties sizzling hot this summer, he says in shame. Tim, is that enough of that?
Indeed.
Nailed it. Tim, Eddie Nketiah.
I've heard of him.
Yeah, people get really fired up about this stuff, right? Why? Just take whatever Marseille wants to give and let him just take whatever he wants to get. Look, that's the key to negotiation, is taking whatever the buying party wants to offer. That's the key. Whatever they want to offer. Here's the problem with transfer reporting. Transfer reporting is not particularly rock solid, Tim. And so Marseille might be offering 20 million euros with 7 million in add-ons. And the 20 million euros are payable in 10 years. And the 7 million in add-ons are if they win the Champions League. Well, that's not a deal we can take, right? We don't know. The 27 million euros could be one lump sum paid immediately, but it's all in, Walmart gift certificates. Who knows? The moral of the story is Arsenal have not deemed it to reach the level necessary, and we're in no hurry. It is August 5th. There are going to be movement. I mean, when you look at West Ham it's funny how intelligent people have gotten about transfers, because West Ham are buying Nicholas Füllkrug, a guy who sort of shined a bit at the Euros, made a name for himself. He's a German international, and everybody's saying, what the hell are they doing? They're overpaying. This is stupid, because he's a 31-year-old striker who is just kind of okay, and he's coming in at the tail end of his career for big money, and people realize that's a bad move. The striker market, as you said, is bad, and Eddie Nketiah, by the standards of this summer's striker market, at a minimum, is a quality player for someone to go get. And I am convinced someone will still come for him. But are you frustrated that the club haven't just taken whatever the buying club wants to offer? I'll admit, I'd like to see him make his move. I'd like to see him go take on his career elsewhere. And I do believe that booking all of that profit, because he is an academy player right now, could free us up to make that one additional move on top of Merino that can really move the needle. So I'd like to see it happen, but I'm not ready to freak out about it just yet. Are you?
No, I'm not. And, you referenced Eddie going on to having a career and all of that. From everything we're told, he's ready to go. He's got his suitcases packed and good for him. Because it's possibly a bit unfair for me to say this because I don't know everything, but I look at Eddie Smith Rowe pushing to be okay, I've got to go play. And I don't know, I'm looking at Reece Nelson at the moment, and this might be completely unfair, and obviously I only have a part of the picture, but I just don't get the sense of a guy really pushing to leave and go and have a career. And so, like on Eddie's side, it doesn't sound like it's, and he's going to Marseille. Like, it doesn't sound like he's sitting there going, no, I only want to go to a Premier League club, I only want to go to London or whatnot. He sounds pretty ready. It's clear, I think, that Marseille must have made like quite a big priority of this player to come back twice, which is probably, and this is where it's so difficult to speculate because we're not privy to the actual negotiations. So I gather that Arsenal would have a pretty good idea that they would come back. That's you, like Fulham. We rejected the first bid for Smith Rowe, right? They must have known that that they were going to come back again, that they weren't going to be left in the lurch with the player. And we're trying to build a reputation for ourselves as sellers, because whatever the truth is about Arsenal selling, the word is out there that we're no good at it, and that in many ways that's I don't think that's really true at this stage, but.
The Smith Rowe deal to me looks like a good one for the record.
Yeah.
So that stands in opposition to that. But yeah, go ahead.
Exactly. And so we're trying to, the word's out there, and in negotiations, that's kind of all that matters really, because it's all sleight of hand and smoke and mirrors and all of that. So no, I'm not panicking about this one. To your point, there's plenty of time to go in the window, I suspect, and it sounds like from the reporting, it's more a question of the payments rather than the fee overall. And when you consider this guy, like where Arsenal are possibly more guilty is the fact that this guy's on like 100k a week because they got cornered on his contract, and that's always going to impact the price. But if we get the price we're holding out for on the salary that he's on, I kind of think that's fair enough. And we do have to, this is the summer. Like, I've always had that kind of caveat really about Arsenal sales, which is before you sell well, you have to buy well, and as your team gets better, you're selling more attractive players. And then I look this summer, and it's like Smith Rowe's a good player, Nketiah is a good player. Either one of Zinchenko or Kivior will probably go. I think I'm expecting like decent prices for them as well. Like, if Arsenal got a load of poor sales from that lot this summer, then I'd say there's probably some merit in criticising Arsenal in that respect. So it's a big summer in that respect. I think it's the first time we've really had really good players at good ages up for sale whose crime is not really being good enough for a team that wants 90 plus points.
Yeah.
Their level's still really good. It's just we want to go into the stratosphere now. I'm not really panicking about this one, not least because I just don't know enough of the details. And the other thing about doing this, Elliot, is even if it falls through with Marseille, we've now set the price, and like everyone knows that's that.
Yeah.
So, unless it gets, to be fair, maybe it gets left to like the last day and someone tries to lowball us. But if Marseille don't pay it, now everyone knows what the price is, and everyone kind of knows, don't waste our time with any less. So someone does come in, we've kind of got a starting figure, or at least like if it's a Premier League club that decides they want him, I think you'd look at this and just go, okay, we know the price. It's just we don't pay it in 150 installments like Marseille wanted. Maybe it gets paid in 3, and there's some add-ons and maybe a sell-on clause. And this seems like fine detail stuff to me.
And to be fair, like, the player may have a part to play in this eventually too, because if it starts to get a little later in August and Eddie is staring down the barrel of a 200-minute season again in the middle of his prime of his career, he can make it clear to the club that he needs to move and make it uncomfortable for the club to the extent possible. We just saw Chelsea do some pretty crazy stuff with Conor Gallagher, the way they've treated him, to try to get that move to happen. And that's a guy who captained their club at one point. And with everything he's been through with that club, they're saying you'll have to play in the reserves the whole season. Like, the player has some power here as well. Before we pick on Marseille too much, let's remember that the French league is in deep financial difficulty. They've already made one big acquisition, as unpalatable as it may be. Eddie's wages by the standard of that club and that league are very high. This would be a very high fee by the standard of that league, and especially with the financial uncertainties there. I mean, devastatingly, Girondin Bordeaux went bust. A famous club that I grew up watching. So like, this is not grew up watching, that I watched some, like that I enjoyed watching in major competitions. Make it sound like I'm a Bordeaux aficionado, but you get the idea. The point is, I think there's more to this story. I do think he'll go. Let me say this: if he doesn't go, I don't regard it as a disaster for the club, but I do regard it as a disaster for the player, and I just wouldn't want to see that for him. For the club, I think it really boils down to this: I don't think we can sell Eddie and sell Nelson and not add an attacker. Then I think we need an attacker. But we may need to move those players, or at least one of those players, to be able to make that all work in terms of the financial considerations. And so I do understand why Nelson doesn't have more smoke around him, because currently that right wide forward position behind Saka is Saka, Jesus, and Nelson. And, Jesus on some days may be starting at another position. So I think Mikel's probably would be more inclined to use Nelson more, or in his mind, he thinks I might wind up needing to use Nelson more than I need to use Eddie. So we'll see. Maybe all of those things are linked together. I still think this deal happens, if not to Marseille somewhere. And I suspect that maybe the club are able to push this deal to the wall because they believe that a Premier League club may come in for Eddie before the end of the window. And so they might feel pretty confident in what's percolating behind the scenes. So we'll just have to see. It's not a trust the club, to do the right thing no matter what. Like the club screw up, and they may screw this up, but like, I think this gets done because the player will want it to get done. I think this is the time. So that's my instinct. Another player that I think has a big season ahead, though, is Gabriel Martinelli. We do this thing where we write down a lineup and we're like, this team's going to win the league. Look at this lineup, right? And we've got Calafiori in there, Merino in there, and we don't even know what they're about yet. But like, we've got other players we could put in there that are very good as well. But you look at the front line that people write in. And I think right now people are writing in Martinelli, Havertz, Saka. To be fair, comparing our front three with City or with even Liverpool, if I want to really step back from my Arsenal fandom for a minute and be objective, maybe our front three is a little underpowered versus those two. And part of my feeling in saying that is a lot of this hinges on what Martinelli is. 2 seasons ago, he was our leading scorer, and he was looking like a player on the same kind of glide path as a Bukayo Saka towards superstardom. And he had a down season, partly due to injury, partly due to cold finishing. I want to change something, Tim. I want to change the way we talk about something, because I think it puts people off. You'll sometimes hear people say, oh, well, he did that by overperforming XG. His good season was overperforming XG. I think that makes people just bristle and not like using data. And I agree. I don't like saying it that way. I think what I'd rather say is he had a very good finishing season 2 seasons ago, demonstrated that he could be a very good finisher. Phil Foden, by the way, talk about overperforming XG, massively did it. But you know what? I think Phil Foden is a uniquely talented shooter and finisher, and I think he will continue to do that in his career. That's a superpower. I think Martinelli is a good shooter. I think he is someone who can have good finishing seasons. And he didn't take his chances at the end of last season, but I think he was still playing a little bit injured and not fully in form. This is a long way of saying, for me to feel that our front three isn't slightly underpowered, I think I need to believe that Martinelli is what we all kind of think he is. But I also accept that some skepticism is creeping in based on a down season last season. So how pivotal is this season, not just for Martinelli, but for Martinelli to be what I still think he is, or we wind up looking, I think, a little underpowered? Because like a Trossard, for example, I love him, but I love him as a role player, not as a 38-game, write his name in ink on the left-hand side kind of player. So is this crucial season for Martinelli and for Arsenal? Because that will determine a lot of how strong we look up front.
Absolutely, and secondary to what we think is what Mikel Arteta thinks, and we've seen he will move past players quickly. So like sometimes fitness reasons, like Tomiyasu was the lock starting right back, not anymore. Zinchenko wasn't always available. See ya. And part of that's just to do with the quality of the squad now as well. Like, a guy comes in to your position for a couple of months, going to be a good player, and he might well take your place. I think with Martinelli, I think there's kind of a few things going on. I think some of it was maybe about the dysfunction on the left-hand side more widely. Like, you look at the right-hand side, Saka, Odegaard, White, play every minute of every game together. We haven't had that level of kind of functionality and regularity on the left. We haven't really had a regular left back last season, but I think more for Martinelli, it's like, I think Martinelli and Jesus is a great partnership because they swap around, they really suit each other.
Yeah.
I think what Martinelli has to do is really prove he can be a foil for Havertz as well, because I haven't seen the click there, both when Havertz was playing left 8 and when he was playing up front. I look at Trossard and Havertz as a partnership. I look at Havertz is like quite a big striker. He occupies defenders, and Trossard is really good. Like, Trossard is a low touch player, like he's a Freddie Ljungberg type, right? He's low touch player, but he wants to run onto things and score, and Havertz helps him to do that. Whereas I think Martinelli and Jesus is more of a pair because, they're both like the road runner. And Jesus likes drifting out wide. Havertz didn't really do that. So that enables Martinelli to come in and take up some of those central positions. But like, Martinelli can't be Goldilocks here. It can't be a case of, I can play with this striker. Because Saka's not like that, is he? Like, we talked about this in the summer of the Euros. Like, Saka, it doesn't matter whether it's Jesus or Havertz up front. Like, Saka just does Saka things all the time. So I kind of think the key to it, a little bit of it might be left back solidifying a little bit. But I think the big part of it is really Martinelli and Havertz striking up a bit of a relationship. We have seen it. You go back and look at the goal against Man City in October. Martinelli runs onto a Havertz knockdown, and things like that. So, like, I wouldn't write off that they can ever really gel as a partnership, but there's a couple of things that need to fall into place. But at the same time, what Martinelli has to prove is that he is not the type of player that needs the porridge to be just nice to perform. And I think that's really the challenge for him this season. I am very enthused by his goal against United and the manager's comments about him afterwards. I love that line from Arteta where he said he didn't come here to prepare, he came here to show he was prepared, which is a really nice line. And when you think about it, like, that's clearly that's what Arteta wants. Like, we know Arteta's a bit of a fiend in terms of work rates. Like, I think he wants to know that these guys, even when they've only had 3 weeks off, they've been in the gym every day, and like, he wants the players that do that extra thing. And I think probably at City, he experienced that as well. He experienced guys who are all coming back early for pre-season and all of that, and all of those edges that you really need to be a world-class performer. And I definitely don't doubt that Martinelli fully understands the challenge, that he will try to respond to it. I don't think he'll get despondent or anything like that. But there are a couple of things he has to prove this season for sure. And yeah, I agree we're maybe a little bit underpowered. Maybe that, again, in lieu of the absolute like world-class option, another good option like to come off the bench would be a pretty good thing.
Yeah, and like, I think that the challenge for Martinelli is Trossard was so reliable chipping in with goals last season. And Gabriel Jesus has looked bright and fit this season, and he can play all three positions, along the front three. And so if Kai and Saka are working and Martinelli gets off to even a slightly slow start, Mikel is going to find himself wondering, do I get Trossard back in there? He was so reliable for me last season, or do I give Jesus a shot out there? That's maybe more competition than he had in the past. When Jesus arrived, he was a nailed-on striker, and then he got injured and he was out. And Trossard arrived in January, and when he arrived that January, he obviously did a lot of really good things and alternated a bit, but Martinelli was having a very good season. And then last season, that sort of flipped. And so Martinelli is a player that I believe can be a superstar. But because he's coming off a season where, partly due to injury and partly just due to underperformance, I think he frustrated more than he sparkled. And because those options exist on that wing, And because we know that even one drop point is going to lead to people pants shitting and saying that we've lost the title, I think it's going to be a case of him needing to hit the ground running and be good early and sort of restore that confidence that, yep, he's that nailed on guy. And so when people say our front three, Martinelli, Kai, and Saka, it doesn't look like maybe Martinelli, maybe Jesus, maybe Leo, Kai, and Saka. It looks like those three. Now, none of that is a crisis because it could be Jesus, Kai, and Saka, and that could work great. Or it could be Leo, Kai, and Saka, and that could be great because, by the way, that's what we did the second half of last season when we went on a run the likes of which the club has never seen. So not crisis level, but as I've said before on this podcast, all our analysis this season is going to be, are Arsenal the greatest or just great, right? It's not going to be, are Arsenal bad? I think there's very, 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 very little chance that Arsenal are anything other than very, very good. But this is the thing then, Tim. And I think this can be our final topic for today because there's not a lot of news to cover other than what we discussed. There is the question of whether we can hit the ground running. If we don't produce a second half last season to rival any run any club has ever gone on, we finish quite a bit adrift of first place and probably in third place. Now, if I had wings, I could fly to the Emirates myself instead of giving Delta extortionate amounts of money. The reason I bring it up, though, is we did struggle a bit in the first half. And if you think about the first half of last season, Nketiah was playing striker a lot. Kai was still playing 9. We weren't really confident in our left wing options. Declan Rice was moving around positions. And we were still good, but we weren't on the kind of run that we would have liked to have been on. We dropped some points in the first half that we'd like to certainly have back so we could be celebrating last season's title. I don't think we can necessarily afford that this season, given the start that we have at Villa, at Spurs, at City, I think all in our first 5. Is that right? So it's a tough start. What are your thoughts on how we handle the fact that we have a very difficult start with the possibility that we may be trying to integrate Calafiori, who as yet has not played even a single preseason game for us, Merino, who is not even with the club yet potentially, and maybe reconfiguring midfield, reconfiguring the back line, and thinking about who our front line is, all while we play 3, I'd say at Villa, at City, and at Spurs are probably 3 of the 5 hardest fixtures we have this season, 3 of the 6 hardest fixtures we have this season. So how do we avoid a slow start to the season, given the fact that we're reintegrating Euro players late, we're integrating new signings relatively late, and we're really going to have to be ready quickly? What would your approach be to ensure that we hit the ground running?
Yeah, that's a really interesting one. I do wonder how much we might, in those early games, kind of stick with what we were doing at the end of last season. Maybe we don't. Maybe we do something very different. Because when you think of 2 seasons ago, when we really when it was the first half of the season where we really took off, in fact, you'd probably say like the progenitor to our best runs of form. So like summer, autumn 2022, and then the second, and then like 2024, been when we've adapted something and the opposition haven't been ready for it. So, that summer, autumn 2022, Jesus comes in, Zinchenko's inverting into midfield, and everyone's like, whoa, what is this? We don't know how to play against this at the moment. And then, you look at the end of, well, not the end, the whole second half of last season, we tweak, have Kai up front, Rice in more of a midfield role, Jorginho and Partey come in. So I guess there's an argument for doing what was working at the end of last season, or there's an argument for like not doing that and doing something very, very different. I do think I kind of worry slightly less about the international tournament aspect, even though it's the first time it's happened for 3 years, just because all our competitors are going to be dealing with that as well. Like everyone's dealing with that, quite frankly. So I'm less worried about that. And,
can I throw a wrinkle in that one though?
Yeah, sure.
I agree with you on Saka and Raya. Just go stand in the position you're used to and do the things you're used to doing.
Yeah.
If Rice is going to move back to 6 more to make room for a new 8 or something like that, that is a dynamic that would require a little change in understanding and partnerships and things.
Indeed, yes. So I wonder if, for example, we continue with the Jorginho or Partey. I prefer Jorginho myself, but, to keep the dynamic the same, maybe. I do also think Jorginho gives us a little bit more defensive protection as well. So, and maybe you stick with Havertz as the 9 for the moment, but Jesus becomes a much more active player in terms of, coming off the bench maybe on 60 minutes instead of 75, 80 minutes like he was at the end of last season, and becoming a bit more kind of integrated that way. I'm really interested to see what we do at left back as well. I think Timber might start the season there, because I don't think Calafiori will have quite had enough time. Obviously, Tomiyasu's injured again, and I just don't think we'll play with Zinchenko. I think one of Zinchenko or Kivior will go, and the market will dictate who that is. But I don't see us trying to rely on either player. So I do think we'll go with Timber at left back, which will be a change as well, because he's never completed a game for us yet. So, he has 60 minutes in the Premier League, something like that, under his belt for Arsenal. But at the same time, that can build a little bit of unpredictability for us as well. So, look, Wolves at home on the opening day, like, that was a tricky fixture last. In fact, that's always been a tricky fixture. I can't ever remember.
There's some videos going around of their most recent preseason game where they look like prime Barcelona, and I realized they also lost to Palace in a preseason game. But like, just watching that video, I'm thinking, look, we need an easy game to start the season. So can you stow this we're the new Barcelona thing?
But I guess the point I was coming to, who is that? What does an easy game on the first game of the season look like? I suppose we had Forest at home last year, which, given Forest's away record and very much a relegation candidate, like, I kind of don't think you want to play newly promoted teams necessarily on the first day. We got stung by that at Brentford a couple of years ago. To be fair, Forest at home is probably about as good as it gets in terms of not newly promoted, but probably going to fight relegation, that type of thing. But, Wolves, they gave us a hard time last year at home. I can't ever remember us beating them particularly soundly. So, that's going to be tough. But I think there were so few options for what an easy opening day of the season looked like that I'm slightly less worried about that. It's more the kind of having Spurs and City away before the end of September. But the flip side of that is we get those games out the way. Actually, so even if they both go badly, we got a lot of time to kind of make up for that, and maybe go on a run like we did at the end of last season, but maybe we go on a run like that a little bit earlier this time round, and give ourselves the room to win like 21 out of 22 instead of 17 out of 19 type thing.
Yeah, I think it is also going to be hard collectively as fans, right? If we drop a point anywhere, not to have last season's scars bleed in and be like, well, there goes the title. We have to steel ourselves for the fact that there are going to be some drop points earlier in the season than we'd like. And we're not going to, we can't respond to that by being like, well, title's gone. We couldn't drop those points. Like, all right, obviously you have to beat Wolves at home, but Villa away, Spurs away, and City away, we took 3 points from those 9 last season. So can we do better than that? I think we can. I think Villa might backslide a little this season. I don't know what to make of Spurs. I think City will be good again. My one hope, Tim, you said something and it kind of resonated with me. What Mikel demands of the players, the way they show up, ready to go, prepared, not needing to prepare. And that he learned that from Pep. And the only thing I wonder is, and this is the optimism side of me kicking in, which doesn't always win out. Can Pep keep these players wanting to work that hard every single season to do the same thing over again? How many times can you ask these young men to just show up in the summer prepared to go hard all season? I think one thing, to be fair to Pep, that he has been good at is letting them kind of start in third gear and get to fifth gear by January and then go to a sixth gear that nobody can catch. So it will be interesting. I mean, if you told me we had to play at the Etihad away and you gave me the option of it being our 5th game or our 35th game, I'd definitely take the 5th game. Think about when we've gone to the Etihad in the last few seasons. March, when they're in that unstoppable T1000 Terminator locked in on the end of the season mode. Maybe, just maybe, it won't be an easy fixture and we won't be fully baked, but they might not be fully baked yet either. So we'll have to see. And it's going to be a really interesting league season again, because outside of Arsenal and City, the number of question marks is just, it's like an episode of the Batman with the Riddler in it. It's like, what are Liverpool going to be under Slot? They look pretty good in preseason, to be fair. But, there's probably going to be growing pains as they try to figure out what they are. What are Chelsea going to be under Maresca? Hasn't been a smooth preseason for them. What are United going to be under Ten Hag? Can they finish above ninth? It's possible. They could finish as high as seventh. What are Spurs going to be? Do they take a step forward? It was very much a mixed season. Villa, will they backslide? Like, I don't know that there's any team that you know what they're going to be other than maybe Arsenal and City. And that is an interesting dynamic, and we'll just have to learn that along the way. So I'm getting excited. It's starting to get exciting. We do have Bayer Leverkusen on Wednesday and Lyon on Sunday, and we'll do instant reactions following both of those. And no need to preview those games. They're preseason after all, but we will certainly talk about them at length on Thursday's pod and in the instant reactions. I think we can leave it there. Tim, thank you so much. Tim's on Twitter at Stominator. Appreciate you.
Yeah, my pleasure as always. Thank you.
We'll have a patron pod for you tomorrow. My name is Elliot Smith. You can block me on Twitter at Yankee Gunner. Hope everyone's doing all right. I do know that there's just a lot of unsettling news out there, and unsettling news, whether it's affecting you directly or not, can make for, a lot of anxiety, depression, psychological struggles. And I know I experienced it laying in bed last night, scrolling the timeline, and things get into your head and have trouble falling asleep. So, I just hope you're doing okay wherever you are and getting through what are some genuinely challenging times that hopefully will come through together. So we'll stay focused on the Arsenal to the extent that buoys us, not that again. But that's it for today. My name's Elliot Smith. We love you, and we'll talk to you after Arsenal 10, Leverkusen 0.